Hello everyone, welcome to TFT 001. We are starting paper 2 of sociology, which is Indian sociology. We will be talking about Indian society, structure and change, and we are starting with section A, which is introducing Indian society. We will start off with subsection 1, which is perspectives on the study of Indian society. The first thinker is G.S. Ghurye, and the perspective is Indology. So this is where this topic lies. It is in topic A, introducing Indian society. The first subtopic, which is Indology, G.S. Ghurye, and this falls under the perspectives on the study of Indian society. When we talk of G.S. Ghurye, we will be structuring our discussion around 4 areas. The first one will be how sociology in India began. We will then give a brief introduction to the thinker. Then we will be studying about his theory and methodology, and finally his areas of study. The source which is to be followed for this particular topic is B.K. Nagla. It is on Indian sociological thought, and we will be studying the portion on Indological perspective and the chapter on G.S. Ghurye. You should keep one thing in mind, that when you aim to learn something, then the main thing or main quality that you need to develop is patience. Patience with yourselves. Some of you are in different stages of preparation. What happens? We tend to get disappointed, disheartened with ourselves, because when we compare our preparation strategy or our phase of preparation with others, we start thinking that we are lacking and we are lagging behind. So please understand that your journey is unique and you need not compare your journey with others. But if you feel that you are lagging behind, then you will have to put in extra number of hours. At the same time, you also need to be patient with the subject matter that you will be studying, because it will not be easily understood, it will not be easily grasped. So you will have to put in efforts. Hence, if you still haven't inculcated this particular quality, then please embrace this quality in your preparation phase. Now these TFTs that we are starting, which are also known as tasks for today, we are keeping it flexible this time. Therefore, we have not released any schedule for TFTs. This is because we have members from various phases of preparation. There are members who have completed paper 1, some have completed even paper 2, while some will be starting paper 2, some will be revising. Therefore, it is your responsibility to choose or keep aside one particular day for TFTs in a week. Keep that day for yourself, spend that day on this particular TFT, and then if you want, you can make notes or revise. But please make sure that one day is fixed for this TFT. Now it is your responsibility to do this. You have to be accountable for yourself. Now when we talk of beginning of sociology in India, this beginning was different from the emergence of sociology in Europe. This is because sociology as a discipline had already begun or was an established discipline in Europe when we started studying it. Initially, sociology was not a school or college subject, and when Gude was a student, then he did not opt for sociology. Instead, he was studying English and Sanskrit. Later on, he also started teaching, and because of his good academics, he received a foreign scholarship by University of Bombay, and he got an opportunity to study sociology abroad. He went to London School of Economics and also Cambridge University. He did a PhD on caste and race in India, which later on was published as a book. And then his mentor, Patrick Gates, was invited by the University of Bombay to start a discipline of sociology. Later on, Gude succeeded Gates as head of the department. So this is how sociology as a discipline began in India. A brief intro to the thinker. He is regarded as the father of Indian sociology. He was the first emeritus professor. He was also a teacher, a research guide. He built the institution or the departments of sociology. He was responsible for Indian Sociological Society. He also won several top honors, and thus he was a renowned scholar of India. Looking at his theory and methodology, though Gude accepted the structural functional approach, but he did not conform to or did not abide by the functionalist tradition, and he chose a different perspective. What was this perspective? This was Indology. Indology is also known as a book view or a textual view, because in Indology, sociologists or researchers, they study texts, ancient texts and scriptures, and then they form conclusions. But this does not mean that G.S. Gude was against field view, because he did not promote an armchair perspective. He himself conducted field survey of sex habits of middle class people in Bombay. Thus you can say that he was an empirical field worker also. Empirical means you go to the field and then you verify whatever you have studied by observing. Thus Gude was not against empiricism. He was in favor of field work and also empirical work. Gude is known as a theoretical pluralist. So he followed various theories. He believed in multiple approach. Pluralism means not one but many. So the first or the basic theory or perspective that he followed was Indology or the textual perspective by studying texts. This was inductive empirical approach. The second method that he adopted was survey type research. So he also was in favor of primary data collection, and this meant this was a first hand approach. The theorist or the sociologist or scholar himself or herself would go to the field to conduct this survey. Third was historical and comparative methods. This could mean studying of ancient texts or scriptures and then going back to history and comparing different societies or different social institutions. But there was also prevalence of generalization on the basis of scanty and unrepresentative data. Scanty means not sufficient. So even though sometimes the data was not sufficient, yet Gude made generalizations on the basis of this data. Now what is inductive empirical exercise? Inductive, if you remember, It means the researcher first observes any kind of social phenomena that he or she wants to study, and then they make generalizations. For example, if someone is studying child marriage, then they will observe this phenomena in different, let's say, villages, and then they will form certain generalizations that, okay, this particular age bracket is involved in child marriage. What is the education level? What is the personal development level? What is the maturity level? All these things, let's say, would come under generalizations, and then they will be given an abstract form. That means I might come to issue an abstract statement that because children under this particular age gap or age bracket, they are not mature enough to take their own decisions, that is why they agree to child marriage. So I issue this abstract statement, and then this becomes a concept. This is known as the inductive approach. So Gude applied this approach to study Indian society. Empirical means any study that I conduct is subject to verification, which means that if I say that child marriage is prevalent among a particular age group and also of a particular maturity level, then other sociologists should be able to verify this on ground. Then it will be known as empirical. But in rural sociology, we haven't made much progress in terms of a concrete theory. In India, we have many concepts given by many sociologists, anthropologists, social anthropologists, but we are yet to come across form a major or grand theory of rural society. We have different thinkers, they have different theories, they have different observations, they have different concepts, and together we are studying rural sociology. There is no one theory which can describe the conditions of all the villages in India. So this aspect should be understood when we are studying Indian rural society. Now, coming back to Indology, what Indological sources did G.S. Gude refer to? Gude, as you know, he was well educated in English as well as Sanskrit. So he utilized literature in his sociological studies, and he could interpret ancient texts because of his knowledge of Sanskrit language. He studied the Vedas, Shastras, epics and poetry of Kalidasa or Bhaubhuti. These resources were either literary or historical or archaeological, sculptural, painting, iconography. So you can see that he had a very good hold on historical knowledge or history of India. And while studying all these sources or texts, he tried to understand or draw a picture of social and cultural life in India. The areas which he studied while studying about Indian society, he studied about the caste system, he studied about the tribes, he studied about kinship, family and marriage. He also studied about culture and civilization and the role of cities. He studied religion, and finally he also studied conflict and integration. The first area under study, caste and kinship. While studying this, he wrote a book, Caste and Race in India. It is a very famous book, and it is advisable to go through at least 1 or 2 chapters of this book. So he studied ancient texts and he emphasized on structural and cultural perspectives. Structural, if you understand, what do we understand by structural? The structure of the caste system, the structure of kinship, the structure of marriage, and how these were related to culture. So his perspective was historical because he studied ancient texts. He also compared different societies, different cultures, and he also tried to understand what were the integrative force existing in society, or what force was uniting society. One study that is important is his comparative study of kinship in Indo-European cultures. There were two observations he found while comparing the kinship practices, that the kin and caste networks in India could also be found in some other societies also. So there were some similarities. He could find these similarities. Also, he found that the kinship and caste in India, they served as integrative frameworks. They were responsible for solidarity of the community. So they integrated the people belonging to a particular village, of a particular community. G.S. Ghurye gave 6 features of the caste system or the structure of caste system. First was that the caste system was segmental. It was divided into different segments. It was not homogeneous. There were divisions. There was also a hierarchy. There was stratification. There were upper and lower castes. These castes were divided on the basis of pollution and purity. Some castes were considered as pure, the higher caste, while the lower caste, they were considered as impure. There were untouchables also. These castes had different religious and civil disabilities as well as privileges. The pure castes were given certain privileges which were denied to the lower castes. Also, the occupations were fixed. The higher castes had particular occupations which they could practice, and the lower caste had some menial jobs which they could practice. One person belonging to a particular caste, a lower caste, could not practice the occupation of a higher caste. There were also restrictions on marriage, on who people could marry. This restriction was found in caste. People belonging to a particular caste could marry among themselves. This was known as endogamy. But people belonging to a particular clan or gotra, they could not marry among themselves because they were considered as relatives, or they were related to one another through blood relations. That is why they could not marry, and this phenomena was known as clan or gotra exogamy. This is because this relation would be an incestuous relation or incestuous relation. All these features of the caste system or the Varna system, these were derived by G.S. Ghurye by reading different texts like the Dharma Shastras. The second area of study for G.S. Ghurye was tribe. As far as tribe was concerned, in India there were two major policies or differing policies as far as tribes were concerned. One was by the anthropologists, and especially Ferrier Elwin. He believed that the tribes enjoyed a separate identity and they should be isolated in order to preserve their identity, their culture, their tradition. This view was also supported by the administrators. On the other hand, G.S. Gure had a different point of view. He believed that these tribes were none other than backward caste Hindus, and they had tried to convert to Hinduism, but this integration to Hinduism was only imperfect. And in order to ensure complete Hinduization of the tribes, it was necessary that these tribes should be assimilated or brought into the mainstream society. He said this on the basis of his observation that tribes had incorporated or adopted some of the Hindu values and norms, like they gave up liquor drinking, they received education, they also improved their agricultural practices. So they were moving up in the social mobility ladder. So they were experiencing an upward mobility, and they were also progressing economically. Therefore, G.S. Gure said that these tribes should not be isolated, but they should be assimilated or brought into the mainstream Hindu society. A second term which G.S. Gure studied was rural urbanization. He called it rurbanization. It is a combination of these two words, and according to G.S. Gure, he was interested in securing the advantages of urban life simultaneously with nature's greenery. So he believed that along with the urban life, there should also be aspects of nature's greenery or the rural life. So both should coexist, exist together. And according to G.S. Gure, he believed that in India, the urbanization did not happen only because of industrial growth. He believed that industrialization or urbanization, it happened because of the need which arose in the rural area. What was this need? He saw that in the rural areas, gradually with the development in agriculture, people started producing surplus, and these surplus food grains, they needed certain markets for exchange. So the rural areas started coming up with small markets. These markets started exchanging the surplus in food grains. They were then converted into smaller townships. Then they were also given certain institutions in order to run smoothly. These institutions were administrative and judicial institutions, which later on developed into urban centers. So, according to G.S. Gure, the development of agriculture needed more and more markets to exchange surplus, and that is why urbanization happened. So, he gave the proof of certain Sanskrit texts and documents to illustrate the growth of urban centers from this rural hinterland. The next area that he studied was culture and civilization. G.S. Gure studied culture and civilization in much detail. He gave 5 values or foundations of culture. These 5 values were religious consciousness, conscience, justice, free pursuit of knowledge and free expression, and toleration. According to G.S. Gure, in the development of culture of any society, acculturation, this was more relevant than diffusion. What is this? Acculturation? It means Acculturation happens when one particular culture is exposed to another culture by any means. Either they interact with one another or they live next to one another, because of which culture 1 goes under change or goes under transformation, and it results in a new identity of this particular group. So according to G.S. Kude, in India, if we take the example of tribes, the tribes or tribal, they were exposed to the Hindu culture, and that is why they started making certain changes to their own culture. They started leaving liquor drinking, they started receiving education, and they also reformed their practices of agriculture, because of which their culture also underwent certain change, and they were Hinduized. So this Hinduization will be known as acculturation. This was observed by G.S. Kude. He also tried to relate culture with civilization. He was mostly concerned with the process of evolution of the Hindu civilization, and according to G.S. Kude, civilization was the total or sum total of the social heritage projected on the social plane. So what is social heritage? Heritage is related to inheritance. So all the cultural practices, the traditions, different paintings or art, music, architecture, all those things that we have inherited from the past, they form a part of our social heritage. And when we look at the different cultural and social life which this heritage teaches us, that means especially when we focus on the societal aspect of this heritage, then we understand about a particular civilization. For example, if we had to study about the Harappan civilization, then we would go back to the architecture, the art, sculpture, the pottery, and then we would derive a conclusion. In the same way, G.S. Kude said that if we wanted to understand about a particular civilization, then we would have to see its social heritage, and then we would be able to gather the track record or the journey of that particular society. In India, according to G.S. Kude, it was a Hindu civilization, a Hindu society. All the social institutions were governed by Hinduism, and that is why he believed that even when we talked of Indian culture, it would be a Hindu culture that we would be referring to. Another point that he mentioned was that if we wanted to compare different cultures, different societies, then we would have to look at their civilizational attainment, how much progress they had made in terms of their civilization or in terms of their culture, and then we could understand the progress of a particular society. Kude also studied religion. He found that religion was the center of the cultural heritage of man all the cultural practices, the traditions that man in a particular society inherited was because of religion. From one generation to another, religious practices were transmitted, and thus culture was also being transmitted. According to G.S. Gure, religion molds and directs the behavior of man in society. So it was like a moral compass giving direction to man. He analyzed 3 oldest human civilizations. These were the Mesopotamian civilization, the Egyptian civilization, and the Hindu civilization. And while analyzing these civilizations, he studied their mythological beliefs, their views of life after death, their views of Godhead, temple architecture, and he also studied religions such as those which were established by Sankaracharya and other leaders. This was the Bhakti period, and here the main or the major prominent figure was the sadhu or the sannyasin, and they believed in asceticism. These sadhus were detached, or they separated themselves from all castes, norms and social conventions. So these sadhus were outside the society, and later on, because of the rise of Buddhism and Jainism, these ascetics, they declined in significance. But the sadhus, they played a very important role in Indian society because they were the moderators or mediators in case of religious disputes. They also encouraged learning of scriptures, and they also defended religion against external attacks. So G.S. Kure studied the sadhus of Indian society. And finally, he also studied about national unity and integration. India was and still is a plural society. We have people belonging to different castes, classes, tribes, religions, languages, cultures. If you remember, G.S. Kure considered the Indian society as a Hindu society, as a Hindu civilization, as a Hindu culture. So, he believed that any group of society which was prevalent in those times in India posed as a threat to the unity of Indian society, which was predominantly Hindu. He gave 5 groups of people who posed such danger to national unity, and these groups were the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the backward classes, the Muslims as a religious minority group, and the linguistic minorities. He believed, G.S. Gure believed that these groups, if they were excessively attached to their own group, or there was a concept of, let's say, groupism, then they would act as a threat to the national unity, and it was dangerous for the unity and integration of India. Now this premise or this view of G.S. Ghurye was based on a particular assumption. He believed that the cultural unity in India was a result of Brahmanical endeavor. That means it was because of the efforts of Brahmanism, that India was united as a culture, because everyone followed the practices of Hindu philosophy. They followed those scriptures taught by the Brahmins, and the major institutions of India, or as understood by G.S. Ghurye as Hindu society, they originated from the Brahmins, and later on these social institutions, they were accepted by other sections. So according to Ghurye, Brahmins were the originators of the social institutions of India. They were also responsible for the unity of India. So any group which was not Brahmin was a threat to this unity. Thus it can be seen that G.S. Ghurye's concept of cultural unity was not secular in orientation. So as a critique, if one is asked to analyze G.S. Ghurye's perspective, one could say that he believed that the traditions of India were only Hindu traditions, but he did not define what these traditions were. So he had a narrow vision about Indian society, because he believed that these traditions had roots in scriptures, the Hindu scriptures which were taught by the Brahmins. Thus he failed to recognize that in modern India the society had undergone a qualitative change. The culture, the tradition had undergone change in modern India. It was no longer dictated by scriptures, and he did not consider the impact of modernity which came as a result of the British, because they also gave us certain cultures, they also gave us traditions. If you remember the modernization of Indian traditions, so India did undergo some modernization. So this aspect was overlooked or not studied by G.S. Ghurye. But at the same time, G.S. Ghurye's contributions cannot be neglected, cannot be undermined, because he was the first sociologist who established this discipline in India. He was also responsible for teaching the first generation of scholars or Indian sociologists in India. He played a major role in the development of the discipline, and even though he was studying the past with the help of the text, ancient text, scriptures, yet he was very much open to or aware of the tensions and problems which were taking place in the present world. So he related the past with the present, because in order to understand the present, we need to understand what our past was. So in conclusion, one can say that G.S. Ghurye was a key figure in the development of sociology as well as social anthropology. He studied varied themes like family, kinship structures, marriage, religious texts, sects, ethnic groups, castes, and also aboriginals. So he tried to cover different sections of Indian society. He also unexplored, stressed on the dimensions which were not explored then, What were these dimensions like? Of culture and different social institutions. So before G.S. Ghurye started studying sociology, sociology was not being practiced from the viewpoint of an Indian, and there was need to understand the differentiation which existed in society, the stratification which was present, the social change which was taking place. And G.S. Ghurye helped us understand that the urbanization which took place in India was not necessarily triggered by industrial growth, but because of the need for markets in the rural hinterland. So this insight was given by G.S. Ghurye because he could study ancient texts, he could interpret these texts, these scriptures, and he made a tremendous contribution to the study of Indian society through his knowledge of Sanskrit language. And he encouraged the sociologists who came after him to study all these dimensions which he opened for them. So this completes our TFT 001, which is on G.S. Ghurye. Please read the chapter G.S. Ghurye from B.K. Nagla. Complete it, and if you have any queries, please drop a message or post a message in our discussion group Brainstorming Sociology. The next TFT will be on the next thinker, which is M.N. Srinivas. All the best, happy learning, and do well. Thank you.